Janis Ringhand. She is in the 45th Assembly District. She was born and raised in Rock County, a former small business owner, accountant, and nonprofit director. She was on the Evansville City Council, elected in 1998, then mayor of Evansville from 2002 to 2006, and she's been in the Wisconsin State Assembly since 2010. And I think it's fascinating, kind of what they did to her, which is her district. She used to be in the 80th district, but under new maps, she was drawn out of that, with Evansville, Albany, Bronhead, and Orfordville joining the city of Beloit in the 45th Assembly District. Let's give a big hand for Janis Ringhand.
Thank you everyone for being here tonight. And like Chuck said, I'm new in the 45th Assembly District. I'm a lifelong Rock County resident, but I do have more of Rock County that I represent right now. And actually, looking at the judicial campaigns in the state of Wisconsin has kind of fascinated me, especially since I got into office, because I realized that I never ever really knew any candidates for judge, whether it was a local, maybe not municipal, I would know our municipal candidates, but circuit court judge, Supreme Court judge, you never really had access to those people to get to know them as a candidate. And that was kind of a concern for me because you never really knew where they stood, what they represented. But then once I got into the state legislature, I started to understand more about it and realize that's because they are nonpartisan folks. They don't usually affiliate openly with a party, although we know that they tend to lean one way or the other, but we do prefer to have them be open and honest, really kind of unbiased in a lot of ways, but you hope that they have strong tendencies our way, I guess you could say. So the first time I got to know the candidates was actually during the last election when David Prosser ran against Joanne Kloppenberg. But before Joanne was actually the candidate, there was a primary. Marla Stevens and Joanne Kloppenberg were running against each other, and both of them called me up and wanted to chat with me. And I felt really honored because I'd never had a judge candidate call me before and ask me to talk to them and support them. So I learned a lot from both of them. And as it turned out, as Chuck mentioned, the Prosser-Kloppenberg case became quite an interesting one, just with those lost ballots that showed up after the fact, and I think we're all still shaking our heads over that and wonder how that ever happened. But then when you start looking at some of the other history of things that have been happening in the Supreme Court, you shake your head a little bit further, and you can't help but notice, well, right now it's a 4-3 divide. The 4 justices that lean towards the conservative side are David Prosser, Michael Gableman, Pat Rogensack, and Annette Ziegler. And every one of them has had an issue somewhere along the line with accountability or conflict of interest that has compromised their position as a judge. And it really makes it kind of curious that it's all on that side. On the other side, we have Shirley Abramson, who is the Chief Justice, who's been there for many, many years. She's the Senior Justice. And Ann Walsh-Bradley and Patrick Crooks. And I've never heard of anything against any of those 3, except for Ann Walsh-Bradley, who was the victim of David Prosser's choking experience. And I think we all know that if that had happened in any other work venue, you'd lose your job. And it's pretty unique that they have the right to censure themselves. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, that they can recuse themselves so that there are not enough justices left to have a hearing on the wrongdoing. And that's exactly what's happened with David Prosser right now. And it just seems kind of crazy that that's how the system is set up. I know Lisa's going to have a lot more detail on the process itself, so I'm just going to talk about my personal experience with what I've learned about the Supreme Court. And well, we did have the experience as new legislators to go in and meet all the members of the Supreme Court, tour their offices, and see the courtroom itself, which was really pretty interesting, and listen to each of them talk a little bit about their process. And they come from very different walks of life and backgrounds, but all obviously in a legal aspect. David Prosser was actually a legislator before he got into the Supreme Court. And so it was really interesting to get to know those folks and learn a little bit more about them and learn more about the process. And Right now, I know how important it is that we try to get someone with a little bit more liberal bent into this seat, because we have some serious issues coming up. Just in the paper this week, there was an article about, in fact, I think it was this morning's paper, about the Act 10 overturn being upheld. That eventually will go to our Supreme Court. And if we have any hope at all of having that overturned, to stay overturned and to protect the workers in this state, the only hope we have is that someone with a little more liberal bent gets into that seat. And that's just a really huge issue for a lot of people. I know my husband was a union member for many years. He had already retired before this happened, but I have a lot of friends who are school teachers, state employees, obviously, and they are really struggling with what's happened to them. And I'm afraid it's leaking out into the public right now, too, into the public unions. And it's just really a shame that that's happening. And there are people that say we should take the right to elect those Supreme Court justices away, that they should be appointed by the governor on a merit system. I can't agree with that, because that's taking away the right of the people to elect their own representation. And we all, I think, know that the biggest issue right now is the outside money that's in those campaigns. Citizens United just really destroyed the campaign process for everything in this state. It's really affected the Supreme Court because of the outside money that can come flowing in. And we've seen what's happened in the last race with Prosser and Kloppenberg, and it's going to happen again this time. It already is. Patience Rogansack has way more money than Ned Falone has. But that's the culprit. It's that outside money that's coming in and really tainting the process. And to have that, our votes taken away from us, I don't think is right. Let's get the money out of there. That's the problem. It's not us choosing bad candidates. It's that outside money coming in and really tainting the system. So I don't know where that one's going to land. You see articles in the paper all the time. Some people think that that's the fairest way to deal with this issue, but I think we are entitled to have our right to vote. I feel very strongly about that, and we'll vote that way if I have the option to do it up in the assembly. And with this election, I haven't had the opportunity to meet Ed Falone personally, but I've heard a lot of really good things about him. And he hasn't declared that he is a Democrat in this race, but we know that he signed the Walker recall, so that's good enough for me. So those little telltale things. That is going to be an interesting campaign or election because, like Chuck said, people don't pay attention. And I think part of it is because they don't get the opportunity to know these people and what they represent. And I think there needs to be a better way of having these candidates get out amongst the public. And I think I was fortunate because as a state legislator, I actually had the candidates come to me, which surprised me because I've never been in that position before. But I just think that they need to have more opportunities to get out and actually visit with the public, because you can read a lot of articles in the paper, but that's never the same as meeting the candidate face-to-face, talking to them and asking questions. So I really hope that people will get out. Encourage your friends, your families to get out and vote, because there is a lot at stake with this election. And it is a 10-year term. That's not like the state legislature. We're only a 2-year term. That goes by really quick. But if you've got someone in there for a 10-year term and they're not doing things the way we really think they should be doing them, that's a long time to get them out. And it's not very often that someone resigns that position, but it does happen occasionally. But usually what happens when someone resigns is because they know the governor will appoint someone that will fill their political party, and it's usually dependent on who the governor is. And this would not be a good time for us to have a judge resign, because we know it would be a conservative judge that would get appointed. So that's pretty much my knowledge in a nutshell on Supreme Court, and I know Lisa has a lot more involvement with it. She deals with it every day. So I'll let Chuck introduce her, and then I'll be happy to take questions later. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.